And welcome back, or if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Rusty, and this is my channel, where I talk about my favorite movies, mostly horror, and my favorite music, mostly metal. And yes, I've decided there was a few little indies on my watch list that I wanted to get around to watching, so I decided to do that. So we're going to be going through a few of I kind of missed, the more indie side. And so, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And welcome to Mercy. Now, Mercy is a Stephen King adaptation from 2014 called Grandma. Grandma's name is Mercy. So, that's Shirley Knight up there. So Mercy was released in 2014, and it's directed by Peter Cornwell. It was written by Stephen King, adapted by Matt Greenberg, and it stars Chandler Riggs, the boy from The Walking Dead, and Shirley Knight and Frances O'Connor. And yes, it is, really. So, this movie, which I like this movie a lot, it does have one flaw that I will get around to. But this movie opens in West Virginia in 1967, where we see a girl or a woman sitting in front of a fireplace, and we see what we assume to be her husband walk in to the room. She's holding a baby, and he's got an axe in his hand, and you think, oh no. And instead, though, he turns the axe, instead of the axe facing him on the floor, he turns it facing her, and then he basically splits his own head open right in front of her. And that's the way this movie opens, which sort of is okay. That would be kind of difficult to accomplish, in my opinion. But so we then flash forward, of course, and we hear George. That's played by that guy from The Walking Dead. So George, he is talking about how much he loves his grandma. She's his best friend, all of this kind of stuff. And we get to see a scene where she takes him to see her grandmother's grave, where she tells him about, he asked her what the writing on the grave means. And she informs him that it's a warning that no one with courage, that if you step on her grave, if it's a person without courage, they would be subject to her wrath. So he does it. He steps on it, and all of a sudden there's this big giant rattlesnake all coiled up like 2 feet from him. And he starts to get scared. She tells him not to move and to start playing his violin and to face the fear. And so he did, and the snake just basically went under his feet and went away. And she said that was basically a lesson about facing your fears, because we had just seen a scene where he is being bullied. He's being bullied at school. So she said, just like you face that fear, you can face your bullies. So he loaded his violin case with rocks, and he went and laid that bully out. So good lesson there, I suppose. Now, we then see this family dinner where Grandma, Mercy, has a seizure, and she has ended up, in the hospital and can't take care of herself anymore. And we are introduced to the entire family, and that is George, his older brother, Buddy, and his mom, Rebecca. Now, Rebecca has 2 siblings, triplets, a sister named Jenny and a brother named Lanning. Lan. So you get to see a little family dynamics where it turns out, Jenny is off in a mental institution. Lanning, he is sort of an asshole, and he won't take her in. So basically, she's going to go back home from the nursing home. And Rebecca and George and Buddy are going to move into her home and take care of her. So that's how the situation unfolds. Now, she's very, very different from when you saw her at the beginning of the movie. She's very damn near psychotic. They keep her on this, sedation medication. You can tell how close her and George are, and he's very upset by all of this. But, as things continue to progress, we start noticing a lot of funny things about him too. And of course, we're hearing all of this weird stuff, demons, haints, witchcraft, things are going on. So one of the weirdest things is that he has an imaginary friend that they let you see. And it's a little blonde-headed girl that he's always talking to. And he is, of course, very distraught about all this. Buddy isn't happy about it at all. He doesn't want to, this isn't a fun thing for him. But George is very happy to be there, and he's really upset about Grandma, So we start getting little backstories. Things start coming in, with Aunt Jenny being in a mental institution, Lanny being such an asshole. It turns out the mother, Rebecca, she has been in the military for a long time, so that's how she escaped when she was 18. So, Lanning ends up taking George out and sort of giving him a little information. He's like, you don't know the real family history about Mercy, about your grandma. And it turns out that because the mother had went off to the military, she escaped most of it, but that the truth was that Grandma had really bad spells. She was very abusive. And he tells him a story about why Jenny is in the mental institution, or one of the many reasons that she's in the mental institution, is a particular incident where she tried to finally leave. And she had met a guy named Terry, and she was going to go off at fiance and get married. And she would, and when she announced that, Lanning told George that Grandma said, well, sure, have a good honeymoon. So, interestingly enough, within 2 days of them getting, I guess, to Hawaii or something they were moving to, wherever it was. No, it couldn't have been Hawaii. It was somewhere that had bears. But they found Terry, almost eaten completely up. He had been, ripped to shreds. They claimed it was a bear that had gotten a hold of him. But like Lanning said, it's interesting that a bear could destroy all of this little area where they found him, destroy the trees and everything like that. This mad bear had done this, but there was not one single bear trap. Now, George kind of asks him, what are you trying to tell me? And, are you trying to tell me that you think Grandma had something to do with this? So he's trying to hint to him that there's something up with Grandma. That perhaps things aren't quite, she's not quite what he thinks that she is. So who is it? Oh, they end up going to town and leaving Lan alone there with to watch Grandma while they go to town. Now, George goes to a priest. Who's Leo? There is no Leo in this movie. But George ends up going to the priest and asking him about it. Turns out that they used to be best friends, and he gives him more background. And that was that she was unable to carry children. She was a very good woman. They had a very wonderful marriage, her and her husband. That she, though, kept miscarrying and couldn't have it. And that was the one thing she wanted more than anything in the world. So he kind of hints to George. Well, I don't think he hints. He basically flat out tells him that when people want something so bad and they blame God, they're a good person, they expect, why would they be punished and all? So that was what he claimed her reasoning was for starting to look for something else. And he tells George that she started messing with darkness, witchcraft, stuff like that. And that there was the legend from that area about Hastrom, is that his name? It's a demon that supposedly it's part of the hill legends, Hastur. So he said that that's what she did. She went and she found Hastur and made whatever deal she needed to make and ended up having those triplets. And that basically now it was paytime. That there's always a trade-off. And that's the reason why her husband did what he did. So here's George learning out, all of this information. And he ends up finding a little cubby hole in the floor. And when they got back home, it was a pretty scary scene, but Lanning literally fell out the door on top of them, and he was ripped to shreds. And it was suggested that he had tried to attack Grandma, and she had defended herself. But, what really happened? Hastrom got him, right? So, that was traumatic. Now, they end up finding, like I said, George ends up finding this little cubbyhole. And in it is a book. It looks like an old ancient book. And when they open it up, there's nothing in it. The pages are blank. So, since his aunt, well, no, they're not related, are they? Jim and Charlotte, he was basically raised by her, but so I guess they're just family friends. But in any event, they go to her because she knows about legends and witchcraft, and she's a painter that paints, all of this stuff. So they go there. They're not home, but she, of course, has all these legendary books all in her bookshelf. And so they look through it until they actually do find this book, and it's called a weeping book. And supposedly it was when the witches in the Salem witch trial era, whenever they would be found with any kind of magical or ancient books like that, they would be burned at the stake and all the stuff they did to witches. So they developed an ink that they could write in that you could not see, and it could only be activated by human tears. So they kind of mess around with the book, trying to come up with, it was actually a funny scene, because the stuff that Buddy comes up with trying to get himself to cry is hilarious. He wants to be a cook, so he tries to cry over Julia Childs dying too early. So that was funny. But George ends up managing to get some tears to come by wishing that he could cure his grandmother. Now, Buddy sees this flash, in the book, showing his brother George in some kind of ritualistic danger. So he grabs the book, he goes and throws it in the wood chipper. He is immediately punished because a big sliver comes and like stabs him right through his abdomen. So Mom and him go to the hospital, leaving George alone with Grandma, who he has become suspicious that perhaps Grandma is something bad. Grandma may be a witch or something of that nature, possessed. So when he's there alone, all of a sudden, Grandma starts freaking out. He ends up giving her some of his her medicine to calm her down. The power goes out. The doors and windows won't open. He's trapped inside the house. And that little ghost girl up here, of course I'm skipping a lot of stuff, but the little ghost girl like tells him she can't get in. She's locked out, and to go get the axe and break through the door. So he goes down there to do that. Now he thinks he's killed his grandmother, but for giving her that medicine. So he thinks that he's killed her. And he goes down there to get the axe to bust out of the house. And Grandma attacks him. She's gotten back up. She's after him. And she drags him upstairs and throws him into this like circle on the floor. It's like a ritual circle. And what's interesting is that book is back together. And it's sitting right over there. And he starts seeing images in it. And he can tell now what's going on. And that is, she's going to sacrifice him. Grandma's going to sacrifice him. So there's this big giant fight between them two. And very, very good, supernatural stuff going on. He does manage to get away that first time. And he goes and tells Jim and Charlotte about it. Now, Charlotte is a little bit more open to what he's saying. But Jim, of course, discounts it all. Tells him that he will take him to see his mother. However, on the way there, he just pulls over on the side of the road, pulls out a revolver, and sort of admits that, why didn't you just stay in the house? And it turns out that he too has made a deal with this Haster to get Rebecca, because he's always been in love with Rebecca despite the fact that he's got a wife. So George is like, for my mom, you're so he is basically in on it. Like he knew that that Haster was coming in Grandma to sacrifice and to get George. So they tussle. He manages to get out because he had been called by his Aunt Jenny, who had broken out of the mental institution, and she was supposed to be waiting down the road anyway. So when he did get away from Jim, he ran to her car. He found her car, and she's already dead. She's already been ripped up by this demon as well. Now, the little ghost girl appears again and tells him to just keep running. That if he goes back, it's like suicide. But he does. He's going to go back and have the showdown with Grandma. That's a really good fight. She does manage to get him back in the ritual and almost kills him. It's pretty gross as well. And the axe is still there. She does a bunch of gross shit to him, and he manages to get loose, get a hold of the axe. And that is a very good scene where he almost is going to do the same thing his grandfather did, split his own head open. But he knows Grandma's behind him, so he moves his head and splits her. So he thinks he's clear again, but that's not the way it's going to work out. She gets right back up, but this time moving like a puppet, which was very interesting. The way I remember when she first got right back up, I thought, is that something behind her? because it was filmed really well. And I'm like, she's moving differently than she was before she got the axe in her head. And I thought that I could see something behind her, but the cinematography was real good. And sure enough, when it gets up there, you know, her hands are holding him and stuff like that, and he's looking down and he can see the book on the floor, and it's showing all of these ritual scenes, and it comes to him, and that is, oh, she wasn't going to eat me. It's Hastrom that wants me. He wants, now that she's old and dead, he needs a new person to inhabit. So he kind of figures that out. And what's interesting is that the body goes to the side and you get to see Hastrom. And he's like, oh, I see what you want. It's me that you want. You know, and he uses his hand to make his grandma's head go up and down. You know, like, yes, that's what's going to happen. So he almost gets him. He almost possesses him. And he's like, all, you know, he turns into smoke, and it's all this supernatural. It's all over him, you know, this ethereal fluid, and it's like smoke and mist. And he's definitely getting him. He's inhabiting him. He's possessing him. But then he remembers that that book is activated by tears. So he manages to roll over, get over the book, and then makes the wish. And the tears come out, and Hastrom is disbanded, you know, or what would you call it? Sent back to the underworld, sent back to his realm. And the next day, him and his family, him and the mom and the brother, so obviously Buddy's all right, which was good. So they end up like burying that book into the earth and covering it up, and that's it. That's the end of the movie. So I think this was a really good. I have read Grandma, which is why I wanted this movie. I am a Stephen King nut, and there's stuff by him that I haven't read, got around to reading, but especially his older works, I've read everything. So this is a pretty good adaptation of Grandma. It does have a flaw. It's very gory, which is good. It's great storytelling. It's a really good adaptation, but it did get a point knocked off. I gave it, you know, I round up. So I gave it a 6.5 out of 10, but that's only because it's really a 7.5 out of 10. But I have, you know, like we all do, I have my little things. And I do not like short films. I do. If you make a movie, and even if I like it, if you make it less than 90 minutes, minus the credits, I'm going to knock a point off. So it's actually, you know, a 7 out of 10 to me. But it does get a point knocked off because it's only 79 minutes. And I don't like that. That's my business. It's okay. You have yours, I have mine. I do not like that. I consider it lazy. And there could have been a lot more added to it. It could have been fleshed out. The ending did seem a little rushed. And of course, it's only 79 minutes long. So, you know, yeah, it was rushed. There was no need for that. I mean, who can't turn Grandma, a Stephen King book, story, into a 90-minute movie? So, yeah, I have my pet peeve. There you go. That's what they're called. One of my pet peeves is movies that are under 90 minutes minus the credits. So your movie needs to be imaginative enough and have enough content to fill 90 minutes without the credits. Then your credits are going to be a minute or two more. So, yeah, I will always knock a point off if you are under 90 minutes because I think it's lazy And I know the response is, oh well, they only need enough time to tell the story. And I'm like, well, you can always add some goodies into it, and there's no reason. If I wanted to watch a series and hour-long episodes, I'd fucking do that. I'm watching a movie, therefore you need to have at least 90 minutes for me. And there you go. That is Mercy from 2014. Yeah, Francis O'Connor, Shirley Knight, and Chandler Riggs. So I heard that was one of I've never watched The Walking Dead, but I watched a video on, the downfall of The Walking Dead, and supposedly his character, Chandler Riggs' character in The Walking Dead, his death was I think they called it the 3 fatal flaws of The Walking Dead that caused the great downfall, because from what I understand, like I said, I've never seen it, but from what I understand, it started going downhill at season 6, and then season 7 was really, really bad, and they went from 17 million viewers an episode to 1 million viewers an episode. That's huge. 94% of its audience went away after the 7th season, and his death was one of his character, Chandler Riggs' character. I can't remember what it was called, what his name is. I want to say Carl, but that was that Oriental guy, right? The Asian guy. That was the first fatal flaw, was something about his death, his fake out death, and then being left a month before you found out that he was really alive still. That was the first big mistake. This guy, Chandler Riggs, them killing him off was the second big mistake. And there was a third one, but like I said, I've never seen the show. But yeah, it was an interesting video though that I watched on it, because wow, I mean, I knew there was all this fandom about The Walking Dead, but I didn't know its story. I didn't know that it had basically destroyed itself, and I knew it had ended, but I didn't know that it had become really disliked by the time it ended, that it was that big. I thought it remained that big the whole time. I've never seen it, but it turns out that it, the last 4 seasons were really, people just, the whole fandom just turned on that show. And his death, his character's death, Chandler Riggs' character's death, was one of the biggest things. It was a bunch of people, millions of people, stopped watching that show when they killed Chandler Riggs' character in that movie, or in that series. So, interesting. But yeah, he is the star of this movie. That's him right there. For all you Walking Dead fans, that's Chandler Riggs. That's the boy. He is the star of this movie. He's pretty much in every damn scene. And yeah. So I'll see you in the next one. It's a little indie spotlight on Mercy from 2014, Stephen King adaptation. And I will see you in the next one. Love you, miss you, bye. Always remember, never forget, you are a very, very special person. And I will see you in just a few minutes, my time. Tomorrow, yours. Bye-bye.